Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. By this point, I'm sure many of you have already heard that Netflix's Witcher Blood Origin was received quite poorly, and to my surprise, by both fans and critics alike. Not only was Blood Origin critiqued into oblivion, but it is one of the lowest Rotten Tomato scores of any Netflix show of all time. I want to take a closer look at this. See, I don't think you need to be an expert on film to know that this show is bad. Its pacing is rushed and slow somehow at the same time, and I can hardly recall the name of a single character from the show just days after watching. However, some of you may be wondering why the reviews and scores were so abysmally bad. It had, after all, The Witcher plastered to the front of it. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly why I think The Witcher Blood Origin failed. If you've seen other YouTube video titles, articles, etc., you may have seen this phrase: Witcher Blood Origin absolutely butchers the lore. And this is in reference to, of course, the writers not staying true to the source material, namely the Witcher books. I touch on this in a previous video where I talk about Henry Cavill's departure from the series, which you can check out on my channel after this video. The writers certainly play it fast and loose when it comes to staying true to the source material in the Witcher TV series. However, I find this sort of an odd criticism of Blood Origin. As someone who has read the Witcher books and played the video games, I want to touch on this first. I'm by no means an authority on Witcher lore. It's been quite a while since I've read the books, and the only one I read more than once was The Last Wish. I also played the games, but please, feel free to leave a comment if I get anything wrong. But for the sake of you all, however, I will be sure to only speak on things I feel confident that I have knowledge of. And if you care about spoilers for the show, you've been warned. The Witcher Blood Origin deals with the conjunction of the spheres, a cataclysmic event that occurred 1500 years before the beginning of Geralt's story. This is said to be a cosmic event that caused realms to collide and trapped many different beings, such as monsters and humans, on the continent, or world of the Witcher. This event also marked the arrival of a force that came to be known as chaos or magic. This is heavily debated among the community, but I will touch on this later. Prior to the conjunction, the world was inhabited mostly by elves, dwarves, and gnomes. Now this is a very short summary, but the odd thing is the showrunners or writers or whoever decided to set Witcher Blood Origin during the time directly before the conjunction occurred. The story that they created is not only an origin of the first Witcher and of series Bloodline, but an origin story for the world as it is in the Witcher books, show, and games. A world of humans, monsters, elves, and others. This is, in my opinion, possibly the show's biggest mistake, and here's why. We know precious little about the time before the conjunction of the spheres. However, we know quite a bit about what comes after. I think a story about humans taking over the world and the first Witchers being created post-conjunction actually would have been a pretty cool story to tell, but that's not what we got. So given that we don't know a whole lot about pre-conjunction, did the writers really butcher the lore, or did they just manufacture it? Which you could also call writing a story. I say they butchered it, and here's why. We do know some things about the time before the conjunction. We know that the world was inhabited by elves, dwarves, and gnomes. We know that there was relative peace, or so we're told. We know absolutely that there were no Witchers before the conjunction, given that they were created by human sorcerers. And we know that according to Oberyn, former king of the An-El elves, one could move quite freely between worlds with a little talent and skill. See, after the conjunction, the doorways between worlds were locked, and moving between worlds became nearly impossible, but beforehand, this was somewhat common practice among particular groups of elves. In terms of the conjunction, or shortly thereafter, it is said that the event gave birth to chaos magic, but much of the fandom tends to believe that magic was present beforehand, just not nearly as powerful or chaotic. This comes from Yennefer's lessons to Ciri in the book Blood of Elves, where she says humans discovered magic after the conjunction. In the book Time of Contempt, Vilgefortz does say that the history of the discovery of magic is a glorified account, suggesting that humans claiming to have discovered magic may not be the case. Some elves like to say that they taught humans magic after their arrival on the continent, but Some think this is just a lie to boost their stake in a world that used to be theirs. I could go on and on with these claims, but why? Well, my point here, without going into too many theories, is to show that sometimes in the world of Witcher lore, we find ourselves dealing with unreliable narrators, especially in the games. This is not a particularly uncommon practice and adds a certain depth to the lore, whereas history, as it is in our world as well, can oftentimes be a bit muddled. The conjunction is brought up a number of times in the books and way more so in the games, especially Witcher 3, but to say that there is debate on this subject among Witcher fans would be an understatement. We know when it occurred, we know what happened afterwards, but the how and why is largely a mystery. My point is that by choosing this specific time period to tell a story, you automatically alienate a large number of your audience. Die-hard Witcher fans all have some sort of headcanon about the conjunction, and by choosing this particular time, you offer what is supposedly a canon image of what the conjunction is. And God, they do such a terrible job of it. They gave themselves nigh complete creative freedom by choosing a time period in the Witcherverse that we know so little about. But even the few things we do know, they get wrong. We know around the time when the first Witchers were created, roughly 500 years before Geralt. We know that there was supposedly relative peace, and the arrival of humans sort of messed that up. We know that traveling between worlds was somewhat common practice. How is it that they can slap Witcher in big letters to the front of the show, then get wrong the few things that we sort of know about the time period? In terms of lore, consider it butchered. The Witcher Blood Origin falls victim to the same mistakes that plague many other modern movies and television shows. In its attempts to champion diversity and representation, the show tends to lose itself geographically. And I don't want to mince words here, I have no issue with diversity and representation in modern entertainment. What I take issue with is when quality of said entertainment suffers for the sake of it. As an example, take a show like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has an incredibly diverse cast of actors and actresses, and the show incorporates their ethnic heritage into the geographical locations they hail from within the world of the show. Those from Dorne tend to have a darker complexion, those from Winterfell have a much lighter complexion, and in King's Landing they're somewhere in the middle. This allows for a diverse cast and doesn't affect immersion, because you typically know who's talking to who and what region a scene is taking place in without the need for exposition. And just as important, if not more so, the accents. My God, the accents in Blood Origin. A Scottish empress, an Irish warrior, an English sorcerer, and an American handmaid. When you're working within the bounds of a fantasy world, geography matters. Culture matters. People want to know where they are when something is going on. They want to know who's fighting who and who belongs to which army. Title cards displaying the location on screen don't always help, especially when there is no cultural heritage that separates one location from the rest. The world just feels bland, and it's nearly impossible to tell how big or small the world is because each character just sort of appears as needed whenever they need to drive the plot forward. Everything looks the exact same by looking totally different. Every extra in the background is wearing the same generic tunic, just in a different color. Everyone looks and talks completely different in every region we visit throughout the show. This makes each location feel shallow and unimportant, and the sets looking exactly like movie sets certainly doesn't help. We hear about Dog Clan and Raven Clan and Prisha and Centrea and so on. But since we know next to nothing about the ideologies that separate these clans, we have no way of distinguishing them in our heads, therefore making the world of The Witcher Blood Origin that much more empty. Sure, you can make the argument that I'm being nitpicky, but I don't think so. In my opinion, when it comes to escapist entertainment such as, I don't know, a fantasy epic sword-fighting gore fest, I would expect people would want to lose themselves a bit in the world they're watching and maybe not pay incredibly close attention to every little detail. Each one of these issues I highlighted may not be a deal breaker, but all of them together, for me at least, significantly affected my immersion into the show. The Witcher series suffered from the same issue in terms of world building. Any Witcher fan knows that the world of The Witcher is immense, but the TV show fails to convey this. They expected everyone to understand the time jumps, which were different for each character, mind you, and the many location changes throughout. Again, if you paid really close attention, you might have figured it out after a few episodes, but you still get virtually no comprehension of the world surrounding our characters. I may be on the outs for saying this, but I actually quite liked Season 1 of The Witcher. Not Blood Origin, The Witcher. Even though this was definitely a problem for me, Season 2 worked a bit harder on world building, while failing even worse in so many other regards. Anyways, I digress. The team working on the Witcher projects at Netflix clearly isn't the best at world building, and letting its audience know what the hell is going on. Therefore, in terms of world building, they fail once more. So I guess this is the part where I start poking holes. I'm not going to name every little discrepancy or inconsistency in the show, that would take way too long, but we're going to name a few. Unlike, say, Rings of Power, I don't find myself hating the protagonist. I honestly just don't understand her. I don't even remember her name, but I remember they called her the Lark, so we'll stick with that. The show does a fantastic job of showing us what a boss the Lark is right from the start, by having her beat up a bunch of random guys in a bar. I'm honestly so tired of how overdone this is. Character is chill, kinda cool. Oh wait, she can fight too? Right from the start, no time wasted. I understand they want to show us she used to be a prominent warrior of her clan, but is there another way of showing us this? She puts everyone down with ease, and I mean everyone. The only fight she has a somewhat difficult time with is her awkward sparring match with Michelle Yeoh's character, and even then we get another overdone trope, the old, spiritually superior Asian woman, about 90 pounds, beating up two people with one hand. Do I have to say it? Immersion. Michelle Yeoh is such an amazing actress, and her talents are completely wasted on this show. So yeah, our protagonist, the Lark, not a lot of an arc there. She's already a perfect fighter, a perfect singer, a kind and lovely woman. Not a lot of room for character development. Her counterpart, Fjall, is probably one of the only somewhat intriguing characters in the show. He's pretty one-dimensional, but does have an arc throughout the series. He's kind of stupid, by the end is a little less stupid, becomes a Witcher, if you can even call it that, falls in love, and dies. I don't really understand this character either. And when I say that I don't understand them, I mean that their motives are a bit lost on me. Yeah, I get revenge and all that, but basically they only discover the Empress Lady has taken over after eavesdropping on a group of random people at a tavern. The Lark did see her sister get killed by some assassins, which, by the way, the assassins in this show, they're not really good at their jobs. Not even a little. There's always assassins, and they're always not assassinating anybody and getting their asses kicked. Anyways, they heard that their clans had been killed, so they embark on this epic blood quest or whatever to kill the Empress, who Fjall used to bang and kinda love, I think. They don't exactly discover much more about what's going on in the Empire throughout the show. We know they're wanted because there's pictures of them hanging up all over the place, and we as the audience know that the Empire is not a good thing. But I can't help but feel that from the perspective of our main characters, their actions are a little irrational. I would have liked to have seen something a bit more pressing, motivating them to get after the Empire rather than just, I heard you were bad and you killed my friends. Not to mention, every character that joins up with our leads on their quest just sort of shows up out of the blue for the sake of the plot. Half of them aren't necessary parts of the show, and their ability to just appear wherever need be makes the entire world of the show seem no larger than a small town. Speaking of the Empire, by the way, how's this one? The King of Zentrea wants to stop the 1,000-year war because there's been a war going on for 1,000 years somehow, and to stop it, he's convinced the two other groups, or factions, or states, or whatever, to come to a meeting to talk about peace and to unite the world. His sister, the princess, then enacts a plan to kill her brother, all the clan leaders, and unite the world? She basically kills her brother to bring about a better world, even though that's exactly what he was going to do, so that's weird, but who cares? So I guess she's the antagonist, but the main antagonist is the sorcerer who advises her, played by Lenny Henry, and man, it does not look like he's enjoying himself here at all. He is not in any way a compelling villain. He lazily acts his way through this nightmare of a show and shows practically no emotion throughout. He sacrifices people, he murders people for power, he kills his best friend for power, he lies for power, and all because he grew up poor. That's right, he's mad because he grew up poor and thinks people look down on him for it, so great motive. See, the reason I brought up Rings of Power earlier, somewhat out of the blue, is because The good and bad dynamics of the show give me similar vibes. With the Rings of Power, I did find myself at times actively rooting for the bad guys because the main protagonist, Galadriel, was so insufferable and downright evil at times. I didn't feel that way with Blood Origin, but I did find myself having a hard time hating the Empire, who were definitely supposed to be the bad guys. There's one scene toward the end that sums this up well. The Lark gives a speech to the citizens of Zentrea, hyping them up for an uprising. She points to one of the palace's grain stores and says something along the lines of, like, take it, it's yours. Because the people were starving, so they break the door down, and it's empty. But somehow, this just makes them more angry at the Empire, and this scene bothered me a lot. Here's why. We see earlier in the show, after the Empire comes to be, that there's definitely political unrest when Aroden, and yeah, the Wild Hunt is in this show. When Aroden speaks to the sorcerer about deserters, he also later mentions that the palace grain stores are nearly empty, showing us that this is at the very least not the palace hogging all the food, and is an actual problem. There's some problems with trade since the Empire began, so on and so forth. And the idea is basically the Empress is desperately trying to use a monolith to travel to other worlds in search of food, while Aroden is trying to politically kind of be political about it and acquire food that way. I'm not trying to argue that the Empress isn't evil. She totally is. Her, along with Aroden and the Sorcerer, killed a ton of people to gain power. However, this doesn't play like your typical bad guy takes over thing, but more or less an underexperienced, overprivileged child rising to power and trying her best to feed her people. The people storm the palace and the Empress gets stabbed in the gut and killed. The Lark killed her, so obviously there was a revenge aspect to it, but it makes me cringe a bit that a show seemingly attempting to be so progressive would let the plot play out this way. It's also super weird how the Lark attempts to show mercy by telling the Empress if she leaves the blade where it is, the Physic might be able to save her. Yet she also killed like dozens of random soldier guys to get to the Empress's room anyways. The show doesn't do a good job of getting you to dislike our villain being both the Empire and the Sorcerer. The people who begin the Empire, Lenny Henry, Aroden, and the Princess, do some super evil stuff in the first episode to gain power, but then they sort of just putz around for the rest of the show trying to run a government. The Sorcerer does some way more blatantly evil things to gain power, but because of his acting, it really just comes across as a whiny, needy crybaby who wants the coolest toy and will do anything to get it. And let's not forget Fjall, who becomes our supposed first Witcher prototype. Shortly thereafter, he turns into a grey rage monster for some reason, rips someone in half, and dies. Way oversimplified, but all completely true. The only chance this show had to make me feel any kind of emotion was his death. But it didn't work, because seconds prior, he was a grey rage monster who had just ripped a guy in half, so I was still chuckling. There's so much I could nitpick. That random sorcerer guy somehow being in the middle of the woods after an episode prior being in prison, no idea how he got there. Or the Empress sending 6 soldiers through a portal to colonize a planet, because, you know, that's about as many as you would need to colonize a planet. The show reflects so much of what is wrong with modern movies and TV shows. The writing especially demonstrates to me a lack of respect for the source material. It's absolute trash, but listing every goofy plot hole would just become redundant, so I thought I'd try and touch on some of the major plot points to show that not only is the show just a big goof, but the overarching plot is also hard to stomach and hard to follow. I honestly feel a bit bad for the actors, because while they weren't good, they weren't the worst part of the show, and a few weren't half bad. I believe that Witcher fans, fans of cinema, fans of television, and normies alike will all find something wrong with this dumpster fire. And as a fan, I genuinely hope to see some improvements in the future. And thank God Cavill got out when he did. Well, thanks for watching, guys. That's the video. Please subscribe. I really like making these, and I'd really like to keep making them. So please subscribe and like the video. And if you made it this far, thanks for sticking around. Have a great day.